Some buildings do not go silent when they are abandoned. They keep breathing in the dark. And on one cold hill above Louisville, Kentucky, that breath still sounds sick. Before we go deeper, subscribe and turn on the notification bell to join the archive. Because some documented accounts are too disturbing to face alone. Waverly Hills Sanatorium was built for one reason: to contain the White Plague. In the early 20th century, tuberculosis tore through Louisville like slow fire. It did not kill quickly. It hollowed people out, left them coughing blood, gasping for air, and fading in plain sight while doctors stood by with almost nothing that worked. By 1910, the city needed somewhere to send the infected, far from the healthy, far from the streets, far from hope. So they chose a lonely hill. The first building was small, a wooden hospital meant for a few dozen patients. It was overwhelmed almost immediately. Then came the massive structure still standing today, 5 stories of brick, concrete, long corridors, and open wings, built to flood every room with air and light. At the time, doctors believed cold air, sunlight, and rest could save the dying. So in winter, patients were wheeled onto open solariums and left in freezing temperatures. Picture it: rows of beds, electric blankets humming, snow drifting onto weak bodies, and lungs already shredded by disease, pulling in air that felt like knives. When fresh air failed, the treatments grew harsher. Doctors collapsed infected lungs on purpose, hoping rest would do what medicine could not. Then came thoracoplasty, one of the worst procedures performed there. Surgeons removed rib after rib so the chest would cave inward and crush the diseased lung. The goal was survival, but the cost was pain, deformity, and terror. The walls heard it all. Later records argued over the exact total, but even careful counts point to thousands dying inside that building. Thousands of endings in one place is enough to poison any silence, and death itself became a problem. If patients saw bodies leaving every hour, despair would spread faster than infection. So the staff used a tunnel. It cut deep through the hill, steep, damp, narrow, and built to move supplies. But it became something else. At night, the dead were loaded onto carts and sent downward through the darkness, away from the eyes of the living. That passage became known as the Body Chute. Imagine the sound: metal wheels scraping the track, concrete walls throwing the noise back again and again, a covered shape descending toward a waiting hearse below. Visitors still describe that tunnel the same way: colder than it should be, heavier than it should be, as if the dark itself is pressing inward. But for many, the worst place is higher up, the 5th floor, and one room in particular, room 502. That floor held patients whose bodies and minds were breaking at the same time. Low oxygen, fever, panic, and isolation turned suffering into something unstable. In 1928, a nurse was found dead there, hanging inside room 502. The records were quiet, but the shock never left the building. 4 years later, another nurse assigned to that same floor fell from the roof patio. Officially, it was called suicide. But even then, staff whispered, today, people entering that room report dizziness, nausea, and sudden waves of grief that seem to come from nowhere. Some leave in tears without knowing why. Waverly Hills closed as a tuberculosis hospital in 1961, but the damage did not stop there. It reopened as a geriatric facility, and new reports of neglect followed. Elderly patients were said to suffer in those rooms long after the White Plague had faded. When that chapter ended, the building was left to rot. Windows shattered, paint peeled, hallways filled with debris and silence. But not ordinary silence, the kind that breaks without warning. Heavy doors slamming, footsteps with no body attached. The smell of fresh bread turning in seconds into rot. Then came reports of something even stranger, a crawling shape seen on the upper floors. Not a patient, not a nurse, something lower, darker, and wrong. Witnesses describe a pitch-black figure moving along walls and floors with jerking, spider-like motions. When it appears, the air drops cold and fear arrives all at once. Other encounters feel almost gentle, like the small boy seen in old-style clothing, rolling a leather ball through empty halls. Investigators have pushed balls toward empty doorways and watched them stop, turn, and return without a visible hand touching them. There is also the figure in a white coat seen near treatment areas and kitchens, often arriving with the sharp smell of antiseptic and old blood. Some believe the building itself is holding these moments. Stone, brick, and limestone may have trapped the force of grief, fear, pain, and dying breath like a recording. Skeptics point to suggestion, to the wind, to low sounds too deep to hear clearly, to a mind already primed to panic in a place like that. But some moments are harder to brush away. A thermal camera once caught the shape of a child where no child stood, warm 1 second, gone the next. Then there are the scratches. Visitors have walked out marked, burning red lines across skin they could not easily reach, especially near the tunnel and upper floors. In the isolation rooms, people report invisible touches, fingers in their hair, a grip on the wrist, a violent shove from empty space. Even the elevator shaft carries its own darkness, a hollow center where later violence added one more layer to a place already packed with death. And maybe that is what makes Waverly Hills so terrifying. Not just ghosts, but the fact that real suffering filled every inch of it first. These were not shadows when they arrived there. They were people exiled to a hill, staring down at the city below, trying to live while death waited beside the bed. So if something still walks those halls, maybe it is memory, maybe it is consciousness, maybe it is pain that never found a way out. Waverly Hills still stands as a battlefield after the war ended, and some battlefields do not empty when the fighting stops. If this documented account stayed with you, like the video, subscribe, and share your own documented encounters in the comments. Because once a place like this enters your mind, it rarely leaves. So, after navigating the absolute nightmare we just explored, the rampant spread of the White Plague, the terrifying experimental treatments, and the infamous Body Chute, you're probably wondering, what exactly is the vibe at the Waverly Hills Sanatorium today? Well, my personal take on this massive hospital right now is all about its deeply deceptive environment. If you drive up into the rolling hills of Louisville, Kentucky today, expecting to find an ugly, rotting concrete wasteland, you might actually be surprised. During the daytime, the surrounding landscape possesses a remarkably serene and peaceful aesthetic. The sprawling, lush green hills and the grand Tudor Gothic architecture can almost feel a bit cozy in the warm sunlight. Nestled in the trees, the exterior almost looks like a dark, historical twist on a Thomas Kinkade-style painting. Today, dedicated historical societies are working hard to preserve the building, offering daytime tours and slowly restoring its beautiful architecture. But honestly, from my perspective, that quiet, scenic exterior is exactly what makes the reality of Waverly Hills so deeply unsettling. The moment the sun dips below the horizon, that peaceful illusion shatters entirely. You can be standing in a brightly lit, beautifully restored solarium, but when you look down those endlessly dark, echoing corridors, or stand at the top of the death tunnel, the suffocating dread rushes right back in. It is widely considered one of the most haunted places on Earth for a reason. The shadow people and the phantom nurses aren't gone. They are just waiting in the dark. Waverly Hills proves that no amount of beautiful preservation can erase a tragedy of that scale. Thanks for joining me on this case here on Rhyme's Journey, and I'll catch you in the next mystery.